Hey everyone, in today's episode of Azure Fundamentals, we'll be taking a look at Azure's database services. We'll also be taking a look at some of the benefits and some of the usages of various database services available on Microsoft Azure. Alrighty, the different services we'll be touching on today is the following, guys. The first one is Azure's Cosmos DB. Then we'll be touching on Azure's SQL database, followed by Azure's database for MySQL and then Azure's database for PostgreSQL. And lastly, we'll be touching on Azure's SQL Managed Instance. Now that we have that out of the way, if you're new here, first of all, welcome to Burning Eyes Tech. Please give this video a like if you haven't done so already, and maybe also consider subscribing. Otherwise, you're not going to know when there's more free videos out from training. On to our first topic on the list, guys, being Azure's Cosmos DB. Okay, folks, in the previous episode, we mentioned how semi-structured datasets can be uploaded by either users or applications to table entities hosted by Azure Table Storage Service. Table storage and Cosmos DB are actually very similar in some ways. Instead of table entities, though, you'll have what we call a collection. And instead of table storage, you'll obviously have what we call a Cosmos DB. The main difference between Azure Table Storage and Cosmos DB, though, lies actually somewhere else, though. One of the Azure Cosmos DB's main features is its ability to actually go and replicate geographically. As you can imagine, this actually has many benefits to it. Azure's Cosmos DB is available in many regions, as you can see here at the bottom by some of the tick boxes I've got available. This gives Cosmos DB the ability to replicate geographically. You just need to go and choose, well, that particular region. So you just go and tick the box for that region and presto, you'll start replicating to that region. It really is that easy. So the more regions you want, the more boxes you tick. When you choose a certain box, your data will automatically replicate to that region, like I just said. There are many benefits to having your data available in more than one region. I mean, that goes without saying. If you now, for example, have people who stay in that particular region, they will now be able to connect to that DB in that region, which is obviously a lot closer. Digitally speaking, latency comes to mind, and latency is lag. So the closer something is digitally speaking, the less your latency. The less your latency, the less lag, and the quicker your response time is going to be in the end of the day. So that's all what we want. The closer something is, digitally speaking, the better for everyone, especially if you've got real-time applications that needs high response times. Now, when you choose a certain box, your data will automatically get replicated to that region, like we said a moment ago. There are many benefits to having your data available in many regions. Obviously, you can imagine just some of these benefits. One of them is the ability to go and connect to a DB close to you. So if you're staying in a region and there happens to be a DB close to you, why not connect to that DB instead of connecting to a DB which is on the other side of the globe? So the closer the DB, the less your latency, as little as 10 milliseconds in some cases. I mean, how dope is that? So the less the milliseconds, the less the latency, the faster your response times. So if you've got anything like an application that you're perhaps developing that needs maybe high speed, fast response times, this is the solution for you. It's going to really help you out in that regard. So it's up to you to choose which regions you want to go and replicate your Cosmos DB to. It's really, in the end of the day, just a matter of choosing that particular tick box, or I don't know, maybe choosing them all if you are really feeling up to it. A pretty nice ability about Cosmos DB in these regions, which I haven't mentioned to you guys yet, is you don't just have the ability to go and read globally now, you also actually have the ability to go and write globally. Pretty nifty, right? In fact, your users will have such low latency now due to these databases being globally and being so close. The response time, never mind it being 10 milliseconds or less, if you start building real-time applications like I mentioned a moment ago, it's really going to make your life easier. Okay, folks, so just to summarize some of the characteristics of Cosmos DB, as we've just explained a moment ago, Azure's Cosmos DB is a globally distributed NoSQL database service. Now, this is semi-structured data, and because semi-structured data do not need to follow schema, this is a schema-less database, unlike the next topic which is on our list. A third feature of Azure's Cosmos DB, which is a pretty big one I might add, is the ability to go and use one of multiple available APIs. The standard, of course, being Core SQL API, which is one of the ones you can go and use to query your data very easily and very effectively. You'll see in this list of available APIs, we actually have table storage listed as one of them. So if you've got table storage, it's actually very easy to go and migrate yourself from table storage to Cosmos DB. And people normally most commonly do this because they would like to get some of the benefits, like having the ability to go and replicate geographically, or just plain out better performance. I mean, like we said earlier, if you're going to have a DB close to you, your response time could be as little as 10 milliseconds. So if you've got yourself applications that need real-time fast responses, well, why not move? So since I've mentioned geographical replication and high performance a few times by now, you can see that Azure's Cosmos DB is actually really designed for building either highly responsive or multi-regional applications, or maybe both. Okay, folks, so the next topic on our list of database services for today is Azure's SQL Database. Okay, folks, so within SQL Database Services, we've got this one called SQL Database Service, which allows you to store structured data sets in Azure. The previous topic was unstructured data, which basically means it doesn't follow any schema or anything like this. This one is going to follow schemas and things like that, relationships. So this service allows both users and applications to upload to SQL Database. Now, within SQL Database, you define what is called tables. Each of these table entities will have a specific schema that each row within that table will have to follow. So that's the catcher with structured data. There's going to be a table, there's going to be a schema, there's going to be relationships, something we didn't have with semi-structured data. It goes without saying that within an SQL database, you can have more than one table, which will obviously each have its own respective schema. Now, once your tables are defined, you can also define a relationship to represent the business relationship between the entities. Okay, so yeah, folks, let's take a look at some of the characteristics of Azure's SQL database. Azure's SQL database is your relational database service in the cloud. Azure's SQL database is also a good example of platform as a service for those of you that don't know. So remember, you get software as a service, infrastructure as a service, and platform service. Those are the three main ones. Majority of all the other ones you're going to be hearing about is normally a subcategory of one of these, or just something that's being referred to as something else. For example, this SQL database service we're talking about right now, even though it's actually a platform as a service, it's also referred to as database as a service. So you can call that a subcategory, it's just another name, but this is actually technically platform as a service. Azure's SQL Database is a structured data service. Customers can use schemas and relationships to shape their data to represent their business. Now, working structured data has some pretty nice benefits, and one of those switch benefits is SQL query language. This is because databases like Azure's SQL provide you with rich query capabilities. This allows you, your customers, your engineers, and more to explore data in just about any way you want. So, they can join multiple tables, they can review all the data, return and extract the data, and also provide reporting capabilities for your organization. Azure's SQL is not only a database by itself, it's a platform. And as a platform, it provides customers with high performance, reliable, fully managed, secure database, secure service, so customers can focus on building applications and very easily maintain security backups and monitoring for their SQL databases. Something worth noting is if you've had the opportunity in the past to work with Microsoft's BI technologies like SQL Server, you might already be familiar with some of the products available in SQL Server family. Some of these products are things like database, reporting services, integration services, analyst services, and so on. If you move to Azure, those products we just mentioned will be represented as separate services from SQL Server family. Only the Azure SQL database is a representation of SQL Server database. Now, when it comes to some of the other services, those were either migrated as similar services or recreated with a new design in mind. Okay, and then guys, the last thing I want to talk to you about is actually something much bigger. Just a moment ago, we spoke of SQL database, which is based on the most recent version and the most stable version of SQL Server with a tiny bit less features, but yet designed for platform as a service offering. And then we have managed instance. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where you need full functionality and capability of an SQL server from on-premises, but yet it needs to be hosted in the cloud, well, then Azure's SQL Server also offers you a managed instance for those situations. This option is way more expensive, obviously, it goes without saying, but it will in turn give you full functionality and full capability. If you find that some of the features you need are missing on the SQL database option, being the first one, well, then you can just go and use Managed Instance. This option is going to give you all those missing nitty-gritty features that you desire. Additionally, we also have something called SQL Data Warehouse. This is a version of SQL Server for large-scale parallel processing operations. Basically, it's big data warehousing. This is something we're still going to be covering in a future lesson, guys, of this particular course, and it's probably going to be in a video called Big Data Processing in Azure. Okay, and then guys, we also have something called SQL VM. In other words, SQL Virtual Machine. This is basically just when you go and take a virtual machine on Azure and go and install SQL Server on it. Now, as we've mentioned in the previous episode, which I believe was episode 2, I think, virtual machines is basically an example of infrastructure as a service. So when we go and install SQL on a virtual machine running on Azure, this will now basically be infrastructure as a service instead of platform as a service, because SQL is for the most part platform as a service. Virtual machines, however, are for the most part infrastructure as a service. But if I were to go and take a virtual machine, which is what? Infrastructure, and I go and install SQL on it, that is going to basically be infrastructure as a service. So it's still very close. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's still very close to platform as a service, but it's going to lean more towards the infrastructure as a service side of things when it comes to hosting your stuff in the cloud. Now, just like on premises on a virtual machine or on premises on a physical server, if you go and install SQL, you for the most part have full functionality. I think the same can be said here if you go and install it on a virtual machine in the cloud. Obviously, Microsoft's for the most part going to be running that virtual machine for you, but on top of the virtual machine, you've got full functionality. So yeah, it's going to be on a virtual machine. It just happens to be in the cloud. But other than that, full functionality, guys. Now, for those of you that don't really like SQL Server, I don't know who that would be. Or for those of you who are migrating existing applications, you may possibly like an option which has a different database engine. Now, in Azure SQL, those options are database for MySQL and database for PostgreSQL. These are both open source and also both very widely and very commonly used database engines on the market. Well, everyone, let's do a bit of a recap of some of the database services we've discussed so far, a summary, if you will. The first one was Azure's Cosmos DB, or Azure's Cosmos Database, which is a globally distributed NoSQL database in the cloud. This option, if you guys remember, will allow you or your customers or clients to benefit from things like low latency due to databases being close by. Remember, it's globally distributed, so the chances of having one nearby is very likely. It's a pretty great option if you think about it. If you have a situation where you've got applications globally distributed, and these applications are high response applications, perhaps. So maybe you've got applications that are worldwide, they need very fast response times, and if they're all going to have to communicate to a database in one location, let's say the Americas, yeah, that's going to be a bit slow. So what if we can have these databases distributed globally? And these folks that need to connect to a database can connect to the database nearest to them. So it's going to give you very fast latency, as little as 10 milliseconds in most cases, as you guys would remember. We also had a nice chat about Azure's SQL database, which is a reliable relational database based on popular SQL Server. Another topic we learned about was database for MySQL, which takes advantage of Azure's SQL platform offering with MySQL database engine. This is also very familiar with PostgreSQL. It delivers all the nifty, funky features, but underneath, it runs on a PostgreSQL database engine. Now, if you find yourself needing a fully fledged SQL server which is managed by Microsoft, then you might want to have a look at Azure's SQL Managed Instance, like we mentioned earlier. As mentioned earlier in this video, this is a way more expensive option, but also with way more features. Pretty much exactly the same as SQL Server on premises, or, well, pretty much the same as the SQL on a virtual machine we mentioned earlier. I suppose you can say it is one of those situations where you get what you pay for. You've probably heard of that saying in life, you always get what you pay for. So the more you pay, the more you get. Lastly, guys, if you're a control freak like my wife that would like total control over the infrastructure, then you'll love SQL virtual machine option, which I just mentioned. So simply just go and install SQL on a virtual machine, like I just mentioned. This will be a fully fledged SQL server exactly like the one on premises. It will just basically happen to run on a virtual machine, which happens to be running in a cloud. But however, for the most part, you will have full functionality. So you can go get yourself a managed instance, very expensive. Or you can go and just get yourself a normal virtual machine, which just happens to be running in a cloud instead of be running on premises, and just go and old school install SQL on that puppy. Okay, everyone, let's do a quick demo for you guys with regards to SQL databases on the Azure portal. So I'm going to quickly go to my Azure portal. Here we are. I'm on my dashboard. So you can already see here, there you can find SQL databases. Alternatively, you can run a search for it there. On the left-hand side here in your navigation pane, there we can find it as well. Or lastly, you can maybe also go here to the marketplace. So marketplace is probably going to be one of the next topics in this series. I'm going to search for SQL database. Just want to see if it gives me a template. And there we go. So at the end of the day, it really is your choice where you want to go and do it from. So I'm using the marketplace right now because that's the one I coincidentally have open in front of me. Click on create. A lot of this stuff has been explained in previous episodes, not SQL database specifically, but things like resource groups and all that. So for now, I'm just going to give it a new resource group. I'm going to call it SQL RG for SQL resource group. Give this server or this database a name. So this is just a database, but you are going to partially create the server for this SQL as well. You're going to specify the name and stuff like that. So I'm just going to go and call this SQL DB for SQL database. And here we're going to go and choose a name for the server. So at the moment I've got none. I'm going to go create myself a new one. And as you can see, the amount of configuration you're going to be doing when it comes to the SQL Server itself side is minimal. I mean, that really is it. You're just going to provide that basic information, and that's that. Keep in mind, the name you type in here is going to be a live name. Now, I'm actually on a trial account right now, but whether it's trial or an actual subscription, either way, this is legit going to be in the cloud. So you cannot take something that's already been used. So I'm just going to go and say Burning Ice Tech DB. That might be a very long name, but it's fine. Burning Ice Tech DB. That's the database server's name. The login details, I'm just gonna go and call this Burning Ice. Here we go. Password, provide a nice secure password. You have to meet the minimum password complexity requirements. I think the minimum password complexity requirements currently for this is 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols. Pretty standard. For some of the other components on Azure, like virtual machines, it's 12 characters. Some of them, they used to be 8 characters, but they've been changed to 12 characters. I'm going to leave it on East US for now because the trial subscription is for the most part limited to East US, but in real life, you obviously want to go and choose a region, location, data center, whatever you want to go and call this, as close as possible as to you. You know, obviously to go and reduce your latency. Click on OK. Don't want to save that. Alright, here you can go and choose your pricing. I'm actually keen on leaving it on the defaults because this is just a demonstration. But realistically speaking, in a real production environment, or even if it's just for your personal gain, I would say just go and check there. If you don't need such a big database with high performance, maybe go and reduce it slightly because it is going to reduce your price that you're going to be paying per month. So, I mean, obviously, the more you get, the more you pay. Azure, as you guys would remember, you pay for what you use. If you don't use something, you don't pay for something. So if you don't need something as fast and as big, choose something small, like a basic package or a standard package of some kind. This is actually pretty high end, but it's fine. It's just an example for now. All of the rest of the stuff, I'm just going to leave it on defaults for now. Click on review and create. I'm going to go with as much of the defaults as I possibly can for now. Create. All right, there we go, folks. So there was a bit of a time lapse. Well, actually more of a fast forward. That went way longer than what you would think. If I had to play that in real time, you would be waiting forever. So it took about somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes to go and deploy that. Let's go to the resource. All right, folks. So there's your server name. Here's the blade for this database. So you can also go and access the server by actually clicking on that name in most cases. Now, it's worth noting that this database is obviously in a cloud, which means there's added security. You cannot just go and willy-nilly go and access this database like you'd be able to access on premises. I'm not saying the ones on premises are unsecure, but there is additional security with the one in the cloud. For example, you need to go and add your public IP. So if you're going to be using good old-fashioned SQL installed on your PC as a client, let's say you're a client or an end user, and you want to go and connect your SQL to a server, you're going to have to go and add it the same way, except now you're going to have to go and add your on-premises public IP address first. So you can do this via logging into the portal, which is where we are right now. I'm going to show you that in a moment. Or as soon as you open SQL and you're about to connect to that database, it's actually going to allow you to go and add your public IP via SQL. It's going to detect that your public IP has not been added to the firewall. You can go and click to add it, and it's going to ask you to go and type in administrative credentials just to make sure you're actually authorized to go and do that. Otherwise, any willy-nilly can go and do that. I did now, however, notice that Microsoft has added a little shortcut here. It says set server firewall. That is not a button that was there in the past, but that is something that you're basically going to have to guarantee to go and do, otherwise it's not going to work. Alternatively, you can also actually go and access your database via the browser if you really want to go and do it that way, but you still need to go and add your public IP. So if you want to go and configure firewall, that's one place. I'm going to go click there. Now you can see here at the bottom, this is where your IP address would show. Mine is not going to show because I'm going to censor it out so you guys can't see it. So if you are on the network or on the machine that's going to be connecting to this SQL database, you can simply just go and say add. Just go and add it, and there you go. Now, if you are not on the right network or the right internet connection, you're doing this on behalf of someone else, then you're going to have to go and get that someone else's public IP address, which becomes a real inconvenience if that person is not tech savvy and they don't even know what an IP address is. So it gets quite tricky. But if it's for you, your company, or anything in that regard, you can just go and add the same IP address twice here, add it in, and there you go. Presto, your public IP has been added. That's how you do it via the portal, guys. Alright folks, that pretty much concludes the theory of today's lesson. I hope you've learned something new. If you have, please give this video a like. It really does help me a lot. And if you're new to this channel, hey, subscribe, join the family. Otherwise, you're not going to know when I release a new episode for this series or any other series, because I'm going to be doing a lot of series. And thank you for watching. I will see you guys next time on episode 12 of this series. Bye, guys.
If you love me, let me know. If you don't, then let me